So, can I start, Hemant?
Yeah.
Just give 2 minutes. YouTube is coming up.
Yeah, I think it is started.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's start.
All right. We can start now.
A very warm good morning to each and everyone present over here. Jai Bhim, and we are here at Boston Study Group Ambedkar lecture series, which we do every Saturday, 365 days a week, unless and until some circumstances. But yes, we try to follow this schedule every Saturday, which is 10 a.m. Eastern time zone, and which is equivalent to 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time Zone. So to little bit tell you more about BSG, which is Boston Study Group. Boston Study Group is a non-profit registered with IRS under 501c3 and under Ambedkarite organization in New England, USA area, dedicated to working towards a just and equitable society. We organize study groups, monthly meeting, lecture series, and other social activities in the Boston area to create educational and organizing infrastructure to carry forward our mission. Our members is composed of individuals, families, students, scholars, academics, and workers who share our vision of equality and upliftment of people. We are particularly interested in creating support structures and working with students from historically marginalized backgrounds. We are inspired by those who worked for human welfare, from Buddha and Sant Ravidas to Savitribai and Jyotiba Phule to Periyar and Dr. Ambedkar. We also have this year's The Awakened BSG Digital Magazine. To talk about it, The Awakened is the Boston Study Group's digital magazine that provide a platform for all Ambedkarites in the diaspora to share their stories, thoughts, views, and talents to enhance the Ambedkarite movement. The intent is to publish the magazine twice a year, in spring and in fall. We are looking forward to literally contribute for our culture's future issues from Ambedkarite across the globe, including our young Ambedkarites. Please visit our website, www.bostonstudygroup.org, to view the latest issue of the magazine. So, for today's lecture, we have with us our speaker, Dr. Kanthi. So Kanthi Swaroop is a PhD candidate at a Center of Policy Studies, Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. His research generalizely focuses on sanitation and urban theory. Just to talk about caste and manual scavenging, there are some, I just want to talk about some of them in a note that I have with me right now. So in India, the practice of manual scavenging is usually invisible and forgotten until media reports a worker's death in a sewage, the sanitation worker protest for rights, or if government announces a new sanitation policy. Year after year, the catastrophic rise of the workers' death in sewers is a scourge and tragedy of manual scavenging, a crisis in public sanitation services that is further exacerbated by caste and compounded by hazardous and risky laboring conditions that surrounded the urban environment by the labor. Usually, the magnitude and the scale of the problem of manual scavenging is not defined by the number of manual scavengers on the road, but this shocking number of workers that in sewage and septic tanks due to asphyxiation. Unprecedented in numbers every year, the asphyxiation had that caused hundreds of these deaths is a consequence of routine violation of law, urbanization process, aging, and choppy urban sewage infrastructure. A weird contractual system, and above all, caste. In India's controversial yet enduring social hierarchy, drawing from any field work in Hyderabad in the talk, I hope to discuss the complex um, relation between caste and Indian urbanization process and pervasiveness of manual scavenging, even when it is illegalized. This is a quote from our Dr. Kanthi, who will be mostly focusing on the today's lecture. And Dr. Kanthi, the field is all yours. You can start enlightening us. Thank you.
Jai Bhim, and thank you, Siddhant, and also Mahesh, who put me in touch with Boston, the fellow travelers of Mahesh at Boston Study Group. Indeed, is an I mean, I do not have to tell how excited and happy I am to share some of my reflections as part of the research, PhD research I'm doing. I'm not yet doctor. But indeed, it's an honor to share some of my PhD reflections through a platform, one of the highly reputed Ambedkar platforms we have today. In the next 25 to 30 minutes that I'm going to spend, we'll be discussing some of the issues related to manual scavenging, which our Siddhant has just read the abstract that I have sent to the Boston Study Group. The problem of manual scavenging, I wanted to stress on the issues related to manual scavenging or the elements that constitute manual scavenging. In a way, I'm assuming that some of you are aware of what is manual scavenging. Some of you are not. So the practice of manual scavenging is a typical form of sanitation practice that is very specific to South Asian region, and predominantly I'll be focusing from India. South Asia, when I say it, is still being practiced in countries which are our neighbors. I mean, neighbors to India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. So in the sanitation, this particular type of sanitation practice is where sanitation worker will clean and dispose and clean and dispose the human excreta with rudimentary equipment or with bare hands. And as an extension, you often see currently as a result of so you see workers diving inside the manholes to unclog it, and also inside the septic tanks without any safety gear. So these kind of practices, wherever there is wherever the workers are manually handling, so human excreta, so has been defined as manual scavenging, and it has been illegalized in India. So firstly in 1993, the recruitment itself was prohibited, and 2013 more stringently it has been illegalized, but it continues to get practiced elsewhere, citing very many reasons by municipalities and also by the civil by the society. So this infrastructure, there are so many, and as I said, there are so many elements that constitute manual scavenging. And I'll while I go on, I'll stretch and I'll try to explain the complexity of this issue. And before that, I would like to start with my discussion with an unusual entry. Instead of not discussing problem further, but I'm going to stress on a solution which actually has been receiving a lot of political and policy kind of an attention. it is also because the urgency, I want to stress briefly about the solution part or the discussion surrounding the solution, given its social, legal, and socio-political relevance. In fact, you see in India, no other social problems pervasiveness has been widely discussed and debated as widely and intensely as the way the practice of manual scavenging has been. Perhaps one could find the only exception, the prevalence of untouchability, the discussions around untouchability. In fact, in social justice movements to activists of all ideologies, journalists, politicians, bureaucrats, even caste leaders and trade union people, manual scavengers, and just in their own capacities, they started arguing, in the sense, vigorously campaigning. I'm not saying everybody is vigorously campaigning, but in their in their own capacity, everybody found an idea or about whether to continue or to practice or not. Immediately they said no. So what I'm trying to say here is that the presence of these actors, while in the campaign for eradication of manual scavenging, look that okay, now everybody on the same page that they do not want, but why still it is being continued? So it is because there is the actors who are involved in this whole project, so make it into a complex, heterogeneous assemblage of a different kind of a collection, while their objective is homogeneous, such as until the objective is homogeneous, and this objective itself need to be addressed in the sense that it needs a little a critical thinking, because as we know, the objective is, until the caste problem is addressed, there can be no solution to manual scavenging problem. It is what people usually argue, because there is also merit in the sense the technology solutions, which are believed to be as a solution, are non-starter. Without a cultural revolution, even technology, primarily as it does, because it may not vanish the older associations with the dirt, but continue to reproduce and repair them, in a sense that it needs to be exposed and debated, the technology aspect that comes to, and but they prioritize a post-caste society kind of a vision for manual scavenging to get eradicated completely. Now, so the problem, in the sense that it's not a problem, but I'm trying to stress this. So when I say reading too much into this particular concept, one can understand that. So first we need to have a post-caste society to eradicate the problem of manual scavenging. Now there is no particular universally accepted opinion on what is post-caste society. In a sense, this would potentially could generate some of the I mean, ultimately, so affected people, the manual scavengers themselves, should get liberated from this whole practice of whole manual scavenging as an institution. But when there is no universally accepted or universally no singular objective when it comes to when it has to be eradicated, a time frame or a manifesto by the members of this heterogeneous collective, it is nonetheless it's going to be the manual scavengers who are who have been already suffering and continue to suffer. For manual scavengers, in the sense that because they think that for them the post-caste society is so the realization of post-caste society can provide liberation from the everyday suffering caused by laboring in hazardous work environments. But there is a catch that I want to just my years of experience of talking to several people who are engaged in this cause, particularly some of the privileged caste and upper caste. And so the secular orientation that they have, the participation in manual scavenging struggle for justice, for them operate on two particular aspects. One, from the moral point of view, that it has to be what manual scavengers are demanding, and other from the sentiment, moral sentiment, with sympathy, invoking sympathy, and etc. The compassion and sympathy aroused upon seeing a manual scavenger working in it. So, I mean, it's not fundamentally not addressed from the point of view of rights, addressed from the point of view of dignity, but it is simply because they seeing somebody like that, they can't stand. Therefore, they think that, okay, so participation in this thing would be sufficient. In fact, for some of them, in fact, actively participating in the struggle for the justice would be itself an atonement for correcting historic misdeeds or wrong ones. So this for them, because the participation in this particular whole project would be giving them a brand that they are anti-caste. Therefore, so anti-caste, and that way they themselves can liberate their position from how they were understood or how they were treated. Therefore, this specific interests that come into this project continue to create more and more gulf between the real concerns of the manual scavengers and so the ones who are actually I mean the others who are part of this collective. Sometimes it is also articulated in the language of class, or in the language of urban poor, or in the language of so the real intense the impact of the issue is shrouded with other pseudonyms. That way, the whole commitment to this problem, or the objective of the problem, the voice where it is coming from, the affected people, is squeezed and contested by citing this or that examples in here. And coming to the other portion, the similar, the flip side to it is, the increasingly there have been a trend that has been increasingly coming up, which is good, that there is a prevailing stream of writing on sanitation, popular media within among the country, and also for the social media. You see one now, coming up with a lot of commentary about sanitation in general and manual scavenging, and also the government is giving some of the lot of importance to Swachh Bharat. Again, we'll come to that later. So, and there are several issues, so variety of issues that make it more relevant to talk. I mean, so making it more and more an everyday effort to talk about it. So, a section of civil society and people writing on sanitation also share a critical, discourse of critical anti-caste thought, that unless India overcomes the enduring injustice of caste, endemic problems in sanitation will persist. While I mean, it is of course fundamentally correct, and so one cannot disagree with any insight underlying this approach. A careful look into a century of sanitation practice in India reveals that. So this particular thing can be misused, because a consensus, you see, a caste problem must be fixed before that other problems in sanitation are addressed, can provide cover for more and more difference, even to give the most basic, basic elements to the workers as rights or dignity. In fact, it virtually, potentially take off pressure, take pressure off from the states and municipalities and other governments to overhaul the existing, primitive sanitation systems, and even to regularize labors increasingly pushed into precarity under the contractual labor system. Because it's to acknowledge it itself is not to call for ignoring, or in fact to asking to seize this particular, interrogating this particular nexus between sanitation and caste, and linkages, and how it has been multiplied. But on the contrary, there is also, so I just wanted to invoke the necessity of contending the both social and infrastructural aspects. So simultaneously, but not leaving it to somebody else, somebody to come. For example, I was meeting a retired engineer from the municipality who has worked extensively for more than 25 years. So once he was telling me, I mean, so the problem he has narrated his experience of talking with activists and other concerned people. In a sense that, so most of the time when activists approach them, so they also push the municipalities, particularly, I mean, the offices, when they have interaction, to eradicate the caste. They want more it as a priority when it comes to sanitation. So he says in reply that so eradication of caste is in not my hands. I mean, something is there is something to demand from the something good that is going to happen from the sanitation point of view, or giving them basic safety gear, or monitoring their work, or so deploying the necessary technology or mechanization. So we will look into it. I mean, it's up to the funding and other more issues that can be that go. But at the same time, so when activists and organizations come to ask for us to eradicate the caste, and we are employees, I mean, we can't take, I mean, we were not in a position to make anything that. And he says that so could be that could be something that can be done outside. So here there could be some the pragmatic understanding of how do we improve and how do we enhance the quality of the life of the workers. So that can be particularly one can prioritize. So for this argument, in a sense, so we talk about in the modern civilizations. So sanitation worker almost has become an irreplaceable, irreplaceable. Who's replacing him is considered disastrous to the cities because of health reasons, and cities, not just cities, but everywhere. I'm taking the example of cities. But what elements make, or so make this worker also largely depends on the local context. Also the influence of other nations when it comes to the sanitation practice. But however, the assemblage of elements, see logic or politics or the policies, infrastructure or sanitation practices, recruitment practices, they set the tone. They set the tone and define the sanitation worker and characterize. See, in this view, the role of society is central and crucial more than the state and the government, which sets actually tone for the imagination of the sanitation worker. Let's talk the example of recruitment practices. Or there is also a lot of discussion that surrounds when it comes to a post-independent country where planning commission and other policies have come. So these things are also in the mainstream hailed as socialist, start of the era of socialist or the socialist policies, and etc. However, sanitation continued as a caste practice even after the independence. So there was no discontinuity that happened from what the colonial government has set the tone for. We see the recruitment practices apart from the occasional committees coming up and doing some surveys. So there was never a serious thought about eradication, and there were no proper guidelines, and there was no recruitment. And I wonder what from seen from the point of view of sanitation and manual scavenging. So one hardly find any sort of so whatever that is hailed in the mainstream as a socialist policy or the socialist state in the making is hardly visible. And now when it comes to recruitment, so after the liberalization, let's say after 1991. So the contractual system that came into place, and because of the contractual system, so earlier that was overwhelming. Earlier it was, anyway, to some extent the government was looking after it, completely outsourced, and now the contractual system has brought in the contractual system. So the recruitment has been transformed from recruitment to procurement. So it continued to thrive, and even now this is the practice. So labor will be employed when there is a requirement of some work, and they will not be employed, and they will be fired. So citing the reasons that, okay, so we don't have work anymore, things like that. And so contractual system, of course, also brings too many other complexities, in the sense, I mean, so precarity is one, but so meager wages and no proper rights, and they can't have unions, even though they can have unions. So they cannot be speaking against the organization, or so it's all I mean, we all know, I mean, I don't have to explain what the contractual employment system is. So and as we all know that, I mean, so overwhelming majority of the people who work as sanitation workers and manual scavengers, with little exceptions, or the rarest exceptions, that are all Dalit. And that too, so we see the caste system. So Dalits, within the Dalits, we have a stratification. So in fact, people who do sanitation practice historically come from, so they, in the scholarly understanding, so it's also, so the scholar Joel has used something called sanitation labor caste, who historically have been doing the sanitation work. In fact, so other caste who do not, who are not doing sanitation work, who not engage in the sanitation, so they have been, in fact, they also practice discrimination with sanitation. I mean, people who come from the sanitation caste. And clearing the now the dry latrines are getting transformed into water closet rapidly. Don't know, but manual scavenging still continues. And these dry latrines used to be on the rare side of, to the rare side of any house, and manual scavenger, predominantly Dalit women, so who cleaned those dry latrines. So used to enter the house from an exclusive entrance from the rear side, not going inside. In fact, their arrival is also announced with the sounds on arrival. They make some sounds, that presence of so manual scavenger, or so presence of an untouchable body, so you have to so one has to vacate the place that they will collect it and go to dump in a night soil deposit that used to exist then. Now, as an extension to it, now we see increasingly sewage cleaning, and people who dive inside the manholes to unclog, or inside the septic tank to desludge, have been spoken and have been reported. In fact, this practice is, as and practice is usually invisible and unforgotten until media reports a worker's death in a sewage. The sanitation or entire the discourse of sanitation itself will go unnoticed, unless there is some churning that happens through protest for rights, or if government announces sanitation policy, because government these days not announcing sanitation policy as a policy, but also coming up with symbolic gestures, such as we see Prime Minister washing the feet and glorifying the work of sanitation work, or even the Swachh Bharat with the spectacles of Gandhi that we see often. Again, one other figure who glorified the work of sanitation and refused to denounce it, despite there being the workers at that point of time was requesting him to make a clear position. So why the letters that he has received were so where they wanted to take him a clear stand. So why he chose not to denounce. So what I mean to say is that historically caste has played. Let me go back a little bit into the history part. And historically, caste has played, so a decisive role. We all know that in defining everything, but also particularly in the urbanization process. So making the spaces in the urban India, and in fact, urban planning, or also built environments, or even selecting particular kind of infrastructural design, and that reproduced Dalit labor force for its maintenance and repair. Even today, for instance, you see in the 19th century, so when the transition was happening from the mathematic theory to more sophisticated causal relationship between a disease and poorer sanitation facilities, that was a time that when these debates were happening across the world, and also the fears of disease, particularly how it happened during COVID, was talking about in the early part of 19th century. So exacerbated by the series of health disasters, in fact, triggered British to come up in India, particularly to overhaul the existing sanitation system of that point of time. Not completely, but they have constructed in the cantonments or in the areas where Europeans resided. Also by citing financial cost and etc., they did not build for the rest of the city. But on the flip side, there is also parallelly another movement was happening. Tilak, Gandhi, advocating the distaste for urban life, and also decried that urban is a Western idea, and so appealed Indians to think ways to protecting the village rather than to have glorious ideas about the West. And this nationalist discourse imagined that post-independence it will be rural for many urbanites, and that will be and urban for them was a temporary place. And you don't see many people, even in the archival information, the history, people demanding to have sewer systems or even to have water closets. So these houses which are not connected with sewers, where water closets were not routine, the manual scavenger was recruited to collect the night soil from these places, and it has been transformed into an institution. And disproportionately, it has been increased the number of requirement of manual scavengers commensurate with the number of dry latrines, because so ultimately the city has to be clean, to avoid the spread of any disease. The migration, during this period, thousands and thousands of untouchables or sanitation labor caste migrated to cities, abandoning the rural, and to join the conservancy labor force. In fact, migration, as it's written somewhere, the migration to cities involved a shift for them that included transformation of the untouchable from a village servant to an urban taboo figure, because sanitation is considered as so impure and hygienic and etc. The resistance for urbanites coming from that particular thing, for example, their resentment towards drainage schemes on the pretext that on the sanitation interventions mean more taxes. In fact, studied this caste-based practice. Weighing one's life, one's humanity better than other humanity. So the government continued to reduce the importance of the living chances, or importance of the right and the dignity of sanitation worker over other caste, and the preferences of other caste. And nonetheless, it also, this particular image, it's not very unfamiliar to us, because it resounds something that comes from Dharma Shastras, so that notional belief that filth brings harm, and so that we need to separate and it has to be the duty of the untouchable and not anybody else. And this state policy that particular time, and in fact, even continued from then. So began in proper way. So more organized and systematic way. I mean, as an institution, as I'm saying it, I'm not saying that earlier it was not there, but more concentrating and dense. They reproduced this Hindu social division of labor under conditions of democracy, even in the post-independent India. So, just a second. How much time I have? Just wanted to ask.
Kanthi, go ahead. I think you can continue for a few more minutes.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah. And that particular point that just give me a second. I think I lost somewhere. Yeah. So, and this particular aspect of this is how the recruitment practice and etc. happen. In fact, so it is also important to talk about when talking about manual scavengers or caste, how it got produced or introduced in the city. And it's also important to see the housing pattern. For example, in Bombay or even UP, so the housing of labor classes, particularly for the sanitation labor, it became a challenge because no other caste were showing, willing to stay in a close proximity with them, given their untouchable status. And they have to segregate and they have to place them where the people do not find much resistance. And therefore, their housing and it also has been happened even now. I think you see in many cities that continue to happen in the environments that are particularly unsanitary, which are adjacent to sanitation infrastructure, so drains or the public toilets, or so where, I mean, basically the point is that so the citizens or the people who, quote unquote, I mean, people who are in the urbanites, so where they so they do not resist, or they do not demand city officials to evict them from their neighborhoods. And it has been institutionalized over the years, and it continued to have the similar kind of spatial order even now. And the surprising part is that so even today, you see, after the illegalization of manual scavenging, so, and the continuation of this manual scavenging is also something that is not something that is not surprising, because everybody knows, but just that people does not in the sense that what I mean to say is that it's an open truth, in the sense it's not a secret anymore. However, this this is now increasingly more and more visible after somebody has died in the sewers, or somebody has accidentally died in a manhole or something like that. So it becomes more and more visible. And these tragic incidents, worker deaths in sewers, are the times where you also see people asking and coming up with some serious questions, such as even after it is proscribed practice. So why it is being practiced, and why wasn't technology deployed, or what is the solution for this, and etc. But again, I mean, the problem again then disappears. So once that time or once that frame goes on. In fact, it is not that the overwhelming majority of manual scavengers are, I mean, talk to see about people, the manual scavenging or the manual scavengers who are employed. The maximum number are employed by the state and union governments, say Indian Railways, local bodies such as panchayats or municipalities, and other public agencies. So they procure them through a contractor. In fact, overwhelming number of manual scavengers are employed by not on the everyday basis. You see them being employed by contractors and so builders in the housing societies and commercial complexes. In fact, this is a direct cause of the disproportionate rise in the number of manual scavengers to clean septic tanks or cleaning septic tanks usually. And there's maintenance and repair of manholes, aging sewage network, and desludging the overflowing septic tanks, or the routines that excessively employ manual scavengers. As there is no modern equipment in place or availability of alternative. I mean, despite there is an alternative to replace this, but unwilling to replace this alternative matter. But now they have been deploying machines one city after the other city. But have to see what it will tell in few years of time. So what kind of a restructuring the work is undergoing. But as of now, you see, it's been as of now, the practice have been continuing how it has actually began, and further it has adding more and more dimensions, where first it began as unhygienic or hazardous. So when manual manhole or the sewage cleaning was not involved, and once it has began, so it became more fatality and hazardous element, and more risk, and those kind of things have been most these kind of things have been became an everyday affair that sanitation workers have to negotiate. So the risk is what I'm trying to point out, central to the, because of this contractual system. So there's a constant transfer of risk from the municipalities, for example, to the sewage workers, because they don't provide any sufficient quality or top quality safety gear, or nor stop workers from entering inside the sewers, because they want to get work done, because there's complex problems, and they think that, okay, so this is the only way that they can do it. In fact, taking the risk for manual scavengers is also a familiar, so in fact, the medium of exchange for and believed to be condition for their everyday requirement, and also possibility, think that, the future, so which in fact they do not volunteer, and it becomes more like a compulsion to do it. And so for them, risking almost is an inevitable everyday process. So, and but the point is that the translation of this risk does not just translate into something else, but explodes. You see that, because it could be difficult to explain in the language of whether it is the risk is the success or failure, but they have to constantly negotiate their life chances, in the sense that risking is cannot be measured in terms of that failure or success. And this is increasingly visible only when a manual scavenger is asphyxiated or killed by asphyxiation. And now everybody comes and everybody tries to pass the buck on from municipalities. They say that contractors say that, no, I have provided everything, but workers did not follow, or workers were in inebriated condition when they entered inside. And they try to pass the buck on every other person, and that way nobody tells and who killed the manual scavenger inside the manhole. For example, somebody went inside and killed by asphyxiation of getting immersed inside that sewage. So who is the responsibility, in the sense that nobody would volunteer to go inside and die. So when somebody is dead by suicide, and people say that, okay, so it's a voluntary, somebody is dead, somebody is murdered, somebody is killed. But in this particular case, there's a lot of institutions and a lot of layers of organizations and others are involved, and nobody comes forward and takes the responsibility. And in fact, this ex gratia, so what they have promised by the law of 10 lakhs rupees, gets settled in a manner more like a formal, like informal caste kind of a panchayati, where these caste leaders will come and to negotiate with from the victim point of view, and the contractor demands that I'll give you the money, more money if you take the cases, if you take off the case, that way to completely make it a incident, completely wipe off the incident. So now the other thing that we keep seeing from the manual scavenging is also in the manual scavenging this discourses is also about sympathy. For example, of course, it's a universal expression of mankind through, because sympathy, we take the feelings of another of our own. However, in the case of manual scavenging, so it is short-lived. For example, the catastrophic rise in workers' death, of course, is a scourge and tragedy of manual scavenging. But this tragedy, you see, cultivates an ephemeral, so the short-lived sympathy across the caste. And this quick disappearance of sympathy points to the fact that sympathy, in fact, alone does not translate into action when it remains largely affective state, because people they show sympathy, and when the intensity of the problem and etc. disappears, and it will, sympathy is also does not the work that sympathy is supposed to do does not translate. Because it is the display itself is not it cannot elevate the manual scavenging from it. In fact, the manual scavenging entire discourse is what I argue is elsewhere somewhere all muzzled by the sympathy, but not talking about the problem in itself. What is the problem, and what kind of questions to be asked, and what is this work? What are the possible solutions? But can you do a comparative study from the best practices elsewhere on the world, and how we can bring them back, how we can bring to India, what are the possibilities, or what exactly is the work, and how they do the work? And such kind of important questions were instead of asked. Such kind of important questions were sidelined and sent to the margins by in a way glorifying one section glorifies the work of manual scavenger, and the other section comes to the discussion of the manual scavenging problem, and there is a death. But when there is nothing, so manual scavenging is still happening, but nobody talks about it, in the sense that they talk, but when the discussions are not as pragmatic as they have to be, and increasingly it is becoming largely a politicized subject, but not trying to see from the point of view of the sanitation as a profession. So what a sanitation worker deserves, or what kind of rights or what kind of duties one's a sanitation worker deserves. For example, during the COVID time, there have been a brief window to reconceptualize or rethink how a sanitation worker in India was otherwise treated. But that as the virus started to disappear, and those engagements or the reconstituting the idea of sanitation worker from the taboo figure to more a professional understanding also got faded with the fear of virus started to go off. I wanted to conclude, but before concluding my thing, I just wanted to share that you must have heard about recent Air India incident where one person urinated on a co-passenger, and everybody, in the sense that condemned this act, condemned this act in the strongest possible words and disagreed with it. And there is also sections people are thinking about, and also stop providing alcohol in an inebriated condition that or intoxicated under the influence of alcohol do things which then otherwise may not do. The point is, when it comes to sewage workers, or the manual scavengers, when they before entering inside the manholes, so as a practice, government, so they provide them alcohol. In fact, they made this practice as they normalized this practice to provide them alcohol as a fact that without it numbed their senses, and so that they could steal themselves from those senses and they could do this work. So that means that means it is completely defining and considering the work in a normal human being cannot do this work, and of course we have to make them intoxicate and numb their senses to get done this with the work. When it is happening in front of everybody, in front of eyes of everyone of us. So this and everybody happy to, in the sense, whenever there is a problem, so they hire people to do this work. But at the same time, so they're not ready to come and condemn this act when somebody is not in front of their eyes, not treated as a fellow human being. Because when they are treated as human being, they were in the first place, so they will not be sent inside the sewers to do this work. And for them to send inside, so they're providing this. And we don't see any collective outburst of anger or condemning these acts. So this note, I'll stop here, and I'm happy to have a conversation. Yeah. Again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Kanthi. Like, I'm very much intrigued by all this conversation, and I'm also fascinated, at the same time shocked to hear all the stuff that's coming and which is going on right now currently, which you instated in the whole conversation. So thank you so much for awakening us in a way. So floor is now open for Q&A. So I would like to request all of you, if you have any questions, you can unmute and you can straight away ask. You can raise your hand and or you can write question in the chat box, either at our Zoom meeting or you're here at YouTube Live. So all the questions will be entertained. So I would like to request everybody to please ask any questions that you might have.
Hey, Siddhant.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Kanthi, Jai Bhim, and thanks for this enlightening speech and whatever you are studying as a part of your PhD. And it is very serious subject and very serious issue. So Bezwada Wilson was on our Ambedkar lecture series when he was here, and we invited him for our Harvard conference also, where he spoke extensively on these particular subjects. And as you said, this particular practice is already banned legally, correct? So any practice which is banned and still the government is employing the people to do this work. So how this is working means, how come that something which is already banned across the nation, how it is still practiced or used by the government to do so? That is one thing. Another thing, I would like to get your opinion on that one. Second thing is, when you talk about the people were provided the housing because they were not given any housing because of their caste structure, correct? Because they were belonging to lower caste, and that's why these people from this community was not getting the housing, and that's why government provided them the housing. But now I believe this particular practice of providing the housing to these people is used basically to keep them in this profession. Because I know in the Mumbai, if these people don't practice this particular profession, they will basically thrown out of the housings which they have been provided. So, and in case of the Mumbai, that becomes a very serious issue if you don't have the housing. So that is provided means it is just like keeping them in the ransom or something like that. So your thoughts on that. And the third one I would definitely like to means people from our communities, has to come out of this one. They have to take the efforts. How we can follow Baba Sahib's principle to educate and all this, and get this particular out of this picture, because as long as you are there, they will employ you. So that is the one thing I would like to get your opinions on.
Yeah, thank you, Jabim. Thanks for this set of questions, very important ones. Yeah, this Mumbai thing, it's not just in Mumbai. In fact, I think it also practiced in Hyderabad earlier, the housing particular part. And it's also called, and people have written about it, it's also called something called locking them with their place. So, and at the same time, so it was government, in fact, encouraged them to bequeath the job to their kith and kin. So when they retire, the retiring sanitation worker, so gives the job to, so there's his daughters or his his sons. Here it becomes the sanitation worker, so becomes the node for the future workers as well. It's not just, he's bringing the new sanitation workers. It's a network in the sense that sanitation worker, so himself becomes a node for the future workers. So through retiring sanitation worker, you will find new ones. Government find new ones instead of taking them from the public recruitment or something like that, because so they know that they can't. So they know that they have locked them to their place and they don't leave it. That's one. In fact, it was a colonial era strategy and they are continuing it. So whenever the workers earlier used to protest for whatever the reasons during the colonial time, so they used to evict them from their houses, or they used to bring new people into the profession, citing that, okay, new people are here and you are interested in doing protests, so let us vacate the houses so that we will give it to the new ones. So later, even now, these kind of practices have been very much in practice. Now not to the extent of, so when they demand for the rights, evicting them, but so if you are no longer a sanitation worker with the municipalities, you don't have any right to stay in our place. So that's something. And second thing, how it is being practiced, yes. So so now it is being so the form, the going inside the sewers. So for example, you see in many cities, so there is no underground sewer system. So they all have apartment complexes and septic tanks. To desludge these septic tanks, so increasingly they employ laborers, because not many places are having the desludging trucks. Even there are desludging trucks, so they're expensive to find. These apartment complexes, they are in a position to pay, but so usually, so they choose to hire labor to desludge them. So overwhelming majority of currently you see, so people who actually are hired to do the septic tank thing. And the other thing, municipalities, for example, so they continue to do this work, not in the broad daylight, obviously. So during nights and in times that if there is a problem is intense. So earlier they used to give this work away to contractor, but now things slightly have changed. Whenever there is a need to go inside, worker has to be sent inside. So the army of managers and supervisors and many other people stay there, ensure that so they come out safe. So which was not the case earlier. That earlier it was commissioned to people, citing that they don't have enough enough sophisticated equipment or enough funds to procure them. That's one of the things. And third thing about, yes, so some of the I think that the problem why they continue to do in the sanitation work is also sometimes, as many workers have told me, that it's also hard to find a competitive alternative employment. because the absence of creation of the competitive other alternative employment is also in a way failure of market to create more and more jobs, and they continue to so do it because they are familiar and they know this thing, and they think that the way this transfer or the shift on their sons and daughters, that we are doing it and they should end with us, and our kids, we do not want our kids to do this. That is it, hope that they are continuing it, but this has been the case over the generations, that they do not want to continue the case. But again, connecting this with the locking into their place, and lack of resources and the lack of capital and many other things, so they have to stay back. Therefore, cities like Mumbai, so they are locked with their place. Also, the other aspect about this is that, so they were under the hope that this mechanization would change or restructure the entire understanding of labor, taking it away how people are perceived them, not as a caste-based position, but more towards dignity element. But it also need to be discussed, debated thoroughly, whether it is just a cosmetic deployment of technology, but or it's a well thought of technology where so you will completely transform. Because in Hyderabad, so there are other castes who started working on these machines. So they do not have any problem. Just they say that we don't have to touch with our bare hands. So so there is no wrong in it. But also on the perception, I get to a point that but there is no discussion when it comes to the largest body who represent the workers, or the unions, or the trade unions. The left has a different view, so they dominate the policy discussions and etc. So they continue to see from the point of view of economics, and they do not want to see this particular thing from the caste question. So that is actually stopping the voice of the actual, because it is again lumped with other labor kind of conditions, but not considered as a caste-based occupation. So which is again actually is the problem, the representation of the problem in the mainstream. So yeah.
Great. Thank you, Kranti.
Sure.
I think in our audience, we have Padmaji,
Sure.
who basically, I think, can throw some light on just now what you said about whether it should be seen that union should see this as a caste-based issue rather than just the economical issue. Padmaji, do you have any comment on this? And you already raised the question about hands up.
First of all, thank you so much, Boston Study Group, and thank you for this very enlightening talk. I just had one or two observations / questions. I was following that strike in Mumbai when they organized the sanitation workers and they wanted to abolish the subcontracting system. And I think the results were pretty good. I know that's not connected immediately with what you spoke about, but even those jobs are extremely difficult and very caste-based. And it was considered a victory where several contract workers became permanent workers, right? If I remember right, close to 3,000 people became permanent workers, and there are about 40,000 sanitation workers in Mumbai, right? But you can correct me. So in that regard, I think the unions played a good role, and it was largely led by Ambedkarites. And from my little experience in Bengaluru, I'm from Hyderabad, the Sanitation Workers Union in Bangalore, which is with AICCTU, is also doing a very good work with sanitation workers, and it is led by Ambedkarites. So there is that intersection too, which we are seeing now, where they are talking about caste, but they're also addressing the immediate needs of the workers in terms of making them permanent, giving them safety equipment, and basically dealing with extremely exploitative conditions that are imposed by these subcontractors. So these are just some of my observations, but I would like your opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, so these are very interesting. I mean, so because I don't work on Mumbai, so I do not have statistics on Mumbai. I work on Hyderabad. Yeah, so that's true that that spike was pretty successful. In fact, in fact, it was also considered as a revolution, but in the contemporary understanding, how do you completely picturize that? And Karnataka thing is also an exceptional because AICTU, I mean, I had conversation with Clifton, so who was also part of this. So there the framing of the problem is like, I mean, it's very different from the general trade union framing of the problem. So they prioritized, or they have seen this through the lens of caste question, not from the economics point of view. Therefore, their demands are centered around caste. In fact, so increasing wages, but also talking about how dignity is, I mean, how they receive dignity, not just for the wages, but also the kind of safety equipment that they get, or other leaves, or, you know, so the kind of treatment other workers receive, and they also wanted to have a similar kind of thing, and recognizing them also as workers and also as a profession. That movement is completely different. I think that movement, when so the government also gave nod last month, but again they have gone back on it, on the deadlines, on the tenure, looks like. But so if it is going to be a success, I mean, in fact, soon it might become a success, then it might set an example for the other cities to follow, perhaps.
Thank you, Padmaji, for the question, and also Kanthi for explaining it. Hope, Padmaji, you're happy with the answer. Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions coming up? Please feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, and ask the question. And also you can use our chat box, and you can ask the question there as well. Please feel free to do it. Please don't hesitate.
So Siddhant, if there are not questions from someone else, I just would like to know from Kanthi. So see, considering this, the structure of the cities, especially the old cities like the Bombay or Hyderabad and all these, how do you think that the mechanized system for the scavenging will work? Means, do you see any options available there for the mechanized cleaning, or it has to be the manual one? Because the access to those points, and it is so much crowded, and all these so many narrow lanes. So even if you want to take something mechanized there, or is there anything in development which can be used in such places, if you are aware of?
Yeah, thanks for this. Again, this has it's, yeah, you're right. But they also have designed these mini jetting trucks for dense areas, and sometimes where these trucks cannot go. So they also mounted these tanks on auto rickshaws, ones where we see. But but again, the kind of storage the rickshaws and these kind of mini things offer, so I mean, so nothing as compared to the heavy trucks and other well equipped ones. And they also require this motor, large motor, to send the pipe and to suck it, because sometimes you can't go inside, and therefore you have to stop at a convenient place. and it's to do this desludging. No, it's quite a challenge, in fact. I mean, they also started different models, for example, sharing septic tanks with the community there instead of having an individual pit to each household, because it's not a possibility. So having a shared septic tank, but so many places households are refusing to that idea that we do not want to, so share our shit with others. so it's getting quite a challenge, so because whatever they wanted to, I mean, so the kind of interventions that anybody would like to do it, because so the point is water supply has a different role, because it goes with motor, you can apply pressure, but when it comes to sewage, it has to be gravity led. So when, I mean, one has to design it properly, and so a lot of complexities that come, and I think so they have decided on some cities there, for example in Orissa, they have different vehicles, so to cater the scale of the problem. So if it is if they have to enter into a small narrow gully, I mean alley or a lane, so they have designed, sometimes they also have so this pull cart rickshaws where they can mount a small a tank where it can collect some amount of, but they have to make many rounds from the disposing station to this place. That quite actually arduous thing. But sometimes they don't care. I mean, they overflow. It overflows. So it's up to them in the sense that. But I think it has to be clearly. There should be some clarity, and many consultants are working on this particular thing, but they have not come to any consensus. It looks like in other cities, but soon I think there's going to be some model or what that they're going to come up as part of this FSM 2017 guidelines, fecal sludge management. They have so they said that okay, so it has to be now. So everywhere one has to maintain the management has to be safe and sound. So I hope to see something, but yeah.
So, Kanthi, one final questions from me, since I don't see any hand raise or something like that. So, during my childhood and all this, I used to see there is a separate colony for the people who do this type of work, correct? And now when I'm thinking about this, we never reach out to those people as our people and did work. And at the same time, it is a reciprocal type of it. Those people from that community also never consider the people who follow the Ambedkarite as their people. So it is both. But now this is a long time back. So I just want to know whether that perspective has changed now, whether the people from the communities who are not doing this type of work are reaching out to the people who are doing this type of work. And at the same time, the people who does this work also embrace the Ambedkar and try to learn what Ambedkar is trying to teach them from the emancipation of the caste perspective.
Yeah, so it's a good question again. I mean, it has been changing, and one of my friend, so who is also doing PhD with me in IIT in sociology, Raju, so has been extensively working on this question in Mumbai, and his thesis says that so there is a significant change in the way for example, Valmiki community, who earlier not taking up the question of Ambedkar, a man called for emancipation seriously, but now started to engage with Ambedkarite politics. In fact, they also did some transformation and reworked their slogans, and also used Ambedkar as, I mean, so symbolically also. So started engaging with the question of Ambedkar, particularly in Mumbai. Also, you see some of you must have followed the issue after Hathras tragedy. So sanitation workers as a collective came forward and protested. And even in that protest, one could see clearly the engagement with the question of Baba Saheb. It's, I mean, he's called for annihilation. In fact, they also demanded that caste system should go away. That way, that we will be saved. And these things which were not the things earlier, but now there is a shift. I do not know how much. Raju would be the better person, perhaps.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kanthi. I think
Sure.
human literacy is one of the key important factor to take into consideration when it comes to all the solutions and the problems and all the future scopes that we are discussing towards it. So I think education is the key element towards
Sure.
it
Sure.
for
Yeah, I
people
wouldn't agree more, yeah.
having those who are in the situation right now.
Siddhant Manoj raised the question. I have a question, I believe.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Hi, Kanthi. Jabim. Yes, Sanjay.
Yeah, Jabim.
It was very enlightening talk. This is one of the areas which has not been touched upon by many communities, including the Buddhist community. My question is just kind of an extension to what Sanjay earlier asked about the automation or kind of making it more mechanical service instead of manual scavenging. In the cities, there may be some challenges, the big cities or the metropolitan cities, but in the smaller cities, even in Nagpur, kind of places where the challenges are low. So are there any models in works that are cheaper? I understand the municipal corporations or the state governments may not have much motivation to implement those. So one thing is the cost of such mechanics, and if at all we need to take that as a social project, just take that as a social responsibility and run that, what would it take for us to implement it in any smaller cities?
Yeah, so yeah, it's a good question. Again, I mean, so you're right. So there are interventions that are happening. So because it just began, it's a recent shift after 2015, also because of the combined deployment of both Swachh Bharat and smart city missions that they wanted to change the entire landscape of how the sanitation work or the sanitation has to be done. I mean, it's also, it is also from the point of view of aesthetics, and so because that therefore they don't take the priority. I mean, they did not prioritize. So the issues of workers. So it's more to do with that particular thing, and the challenge. One of the key challenges is that when you collect the sludge from the septic tanks, and it has to be one cannot dispose it anywhere, and it has to be disposed in this fecal sludge treatment plants. And now we do not have fecal sludge treatment plants. In fact, we have, in the sense that not in the required number. Even though that you have in their absence, so now it is being disposed in a deserted place or where and mixed with water bodies at nights. So not, of course, not in a broad daylight. So that is one problem, that we do not have infrastructure for collect, even though one can collect it. So there is no infrastructure to properly manage it and dispose it. So that are under construction, and for them finding land itself is getting a problem, that people do not want to stay close to the fecal sludge treatment plant, because acquiring land is again becoming an issue for them. So in some of the cities, for example, Hyderabad and Delhi, so governments have partnered with Dicky. You might have aware of Dicky, Dalit Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries. So the Dicky also has come up with this tagline that making labor into entrepreneurs. So who are the labor, erstwhile labor, so manual scavengers. So we will prioritize giving a subsidy-based loan to them to own a machine. That way they'll become entrepreneurs and do not continue to exist as a labor. And the results of this is not out. I mean, the sense, so it's so new because implemented in 2017 and full scale in 2018, and 2 years. So there was a COVID, and not much have been studied on this particular thing, on this transformation. So perhaps in next 2-3 years, we could know something about this. But yes, and now there is increasingly a lot of a lot of companies are investing something or the other into the sanitation, or to protect the rights of workers by providing some equipment. So as part of their corporate social responsibility, which was not the case earlier. But so there is a lot of scope, and I think governments are willing to partner with technologies, because there is also these municipalities, particularly ranking has been introduced in the country, that they wanted to obviously want to be in the top positions, every municipality. Therefore, they're trying some innovation, but that innovation is not, of course, everybody knows it's not sufficient, and that is limited only to the day of inspection. In general, you don't find them, being deployed or being used. But it's a welcoming thing that they're open about this, and they're now looking forward to the alternative solutions. Perhaps there could be some change. I'm not sure how much, but definitely next 2-3 years. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we are almost at our a very end of our session. So one more question, if anybody has it, we can take that. Okay, I don't see anybody raising their hands and no questions in the. I think whatever you shared, I think it's reached to every single person during this conversation that we had today. So for all the new people who have joined, and also I'm once again thankful for our speaker, Kanthi, for joining with us. It's late Saturday night. And be present here, presenting on a topic which is such a vital topic, which is affected directly or indirectly with or within our community. We can see people across them suffering with it, and also never addressed this kind of issue before. So I'm very much thankful for Kanthi for bringing this up and educating us on this. So Kanthi Swaroop, speaker, who is a PhD candidate at the Center for Policy Study, Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. Also, everybody as IIT Bombay. Research which is focused on sanitary and urban theory. Thank you so much, Kanthi.
Thank you so much, and JBIM. Look forward to seeing you again in a more in-person setup.
JBIM.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.